John doesn't have one.
I give him mine.
Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, July 5th, 2011. It's 6:30 p.m. We're at the Palm Coast Community Center for the regularly scheduled meeting of the Palm Coast Mayor and City Council. Would you please rise and join me in a Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Mayor Netz?
Here.
Vice Mayor Meeker?
Here.
Councilmember DeStefano?
Here.
Councilmember Lewis?
Here.
Councilmember Mormon?
Here.
Mayor, all members are present.
Thank you very much. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the June 21st council meeting and the June 28th city council workshop. Are there any additions, corrections, or is there a motion to approve?
I move adoption.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries without objection. Item number 2, proclamation recognizing the month of July as Recreation and Parks Month. Mr. Mormon.
It's not Tea Party, it's Recreation Parks.
Mr. Mormon, careful, I think Luann's got this plan for you while you're up there, so.
She has big surprises, right?
Nothing will come out. Well, it'll get there.
Where do you see the water cannon?
Oh, no, oh, the water cannon, right, and the water balloons, right? This is the proclamation for our Parks and Recreation Month, and it reads, whereas parks and recreation systems are dedicated to enhancing the quality of life for millions of residents and communities around the world through recreation programming, leisure activities, and conservation efforts. And whereas parks, recreation activities, and leisure experience provide opportunities for young people to live, grow, and develop into contributing members of society. And whereas parks, recreation activities, leisure experience create lifelines and continuous life experience for older members of the community. And whereas parks, recreation activities, and leisure experience generate opportunities for people to come together and experience a sense of community. And whereas parks, recreation activities, and leisure experience pay dividends to communities by attracting businesses, jobs, and increasing housing value. And whereas the City of Palm Coast recognizes the vital contributions of employees and volunteers in parks and recreation facilities, and whereas these dedicated supporters keep parks clean and safe for visitors, organize youth activities, provide educational programs on health, nutrition, first aid, and gardening, advocate for more open space and better trails. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the City Council of the City of Palm Coast does hereby proclaim the month of July 2011 as Recreation and Parks Month. Be it further resolved that we hereby request and that during the Parks and Recreation Month, all citizens enjoy what their community has to offer by taking part in their favorite sport, visiting outdoors, and spending time with family and friends relaxing. Adopted this 5th day of July 2011, John Netz, Mayor.
On behalf of the Park and Recreation Department, the Leisure Services Advisory Committee, and the citizens of Palm Coast, we thank the members of the council for this proclamation as it recognizes the vital importance of a strong, vibrant, and diverse set of recreation and cultural offerings to the long-term success of the community. We welcome the council's continued support and invite the community to seek out the Leisure Services Advisory Committee and its members so that we may be your representative for helping to create the best quality of life in Palm Coast. Thanks.
Before you all sit down, let me introduce those standing behind me. This is our Leisure Services Advisory Committee. Our Vice Chair, Sandy Miller. One of our representatives, Dennis Hurley. Charles Ballard, and Eleanor Milburn. So thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you very much.
Luann, you have another red shirt just walked in.
And Mary Girola, one of our new members of the board. So thank you all. Okay. We have been celebrating National Parks and Recreation Month since 1985, and how things have changed over the years. as you can see, Parks and Recreation is no longer, that is something that's just in the community. In the community. But it is becoming and has become over the years an essential service to our community and the quality of life of the residents and those that live here in our community. Sorry. We're going to transition to a different area now. We all get into Parks and Recreation for various reasons. I began with an interest actually in outdoor recreation. My goal was to be a forest ranger. Started school in Arizona and actually went back to Pennsylvania to complete my education and got an internship with our local Parks and Recreation department and never looked back, and that was 22 years ago. What I learned there, though, was that we provide opportunities for youth to learn teamwork, sportsmanship, and fair play. We also provide services such as summer camp that's essential for our working families in our community. We also provide much-needed social interactions for those in our communities and facilities that bring our neighbors together. So over the years, Parks and Recreation has changed and grown, and like I said, has become an essential service to the quality of life of the community and its residents. Now we're going to hear from our Parks and Recreation staff, Becky, Candace, and Lauren Bennett.
Knowing that you have such a big impact and positive impact really, hits home and makes you love what you do, and glad that we have Parks and Rec in Palm Coast.
What job could be better than going to work every day and creating fun and building memories for people of the community to last a lifetime?
Yeah, it means a lot to me, especially knowing that for seniors, there's times when getting out and going into the parks and participating in different programs we offer, that might be the only time that they're getting out and interacting with the community and different people.
The community can benefit from parks and open spaces. I think it's an opportunity for families to go and leisurely play and build relationships and memories.
That provides, especially youth, an opportunity to get on the right path before they're persuaded to go down those negative paths with gangs and stuff.
Recreation as a whole, it just brings the community together, it makes it stronger.
As a young adult, I was a camp counselor for a local Parks and Recreation department, and I chose the degree of elementary education. I pursued that for quite some time, but I realized that being an athlete at heart was really what I wanted to do. So I went into sport management degree. I did that at Florida College in St. Augustine for 2 years and realized at my end of the senior year, I kind of was lost and I didn't know what my true heart wanted me to do. Therefore, I went to my professor and also my mentor. She talked to me about what I really want to do with my life, and I chose that I really would like to make people happy. I would like to work with children and also be in the sport industry. She brought me to Parks and Recreation. She presented me with an opportunity to do an internship with the city of Palm Coast. I came to Palm Coast, did my internship, and I haven't left since then. This is really something that I truly want to do for the rest of my life.
I would do a disservice at this point if I didn't take a moment to thank those individuals who work diligently behind the scenes each and every day in Parks and Recreation. Each and every day.
Give it up back to cheese, give it up back to cheese, give it up back to cheese, give it up back to cheese. All right, ready? I got to have it, I got to have it, I got to have it. Give it up back to cheese, give it up back to cheese, give it up back to cheese,
Candace is going to explain that.
We wanted to show you what we do with our children each and every morning to get them pumped up about summer camp, get our staff to do some team building, and this is what we do in the mornings when the kids come for summer camp. We are the Macaroni and Cheese Crew.
I'm kind of disappointed you didn't have Councilmember Mormon do it.
Obviously, they need no introduction. Those are some of our camp counselors who are here with us for the summer, and what an impact they make on the kids' lives. We also have a couple of our lifeguards, Jackie and Hunter, who are at our Frida Zamba swimming pool, and I cannot say enough about our guards and the training that they've gone through and they continue to participate in to ensure that we have an extremely safe facility and a place where parents feel comfortable bringing their children, and that's key. So now we're going to, before we can move on, I do want to thank a group that's not here tonight, but I'm hoping Richard will pass along the thanks, and that's our Public Works crew who are out in the parks each and every day, cutting the grass, picking up the litter, cleaning bathrooms, restocking, lining our baseball fields. I can't even go on about how much they do in parks for us in this community. They work hard and diligently each and every day, and please express how important they are to what we do and to the residents of our community, because when you don't get a complaint about grass or a bathroom, it's remarkable. So thank you. Okay, now Becky's going to share with you the events coming up for this month.
Good evening. We started out Parks and Rec Month actually this past weekend at the Frida Zamba Pool. We had a Star Spangled Banner weekend where those families with military IDs got in free, very successful. And yesterday we had our Red, White, and Blue Day, and I am proud to say that we had over 270 people come through the gate at the pool. It was a really exciting day. Our guards were busy, just making sure everyone was safe. It was very successful, and everyone was extremely happy. So we were proud. That was one of our promotions that we're trying to do to get people to remember. We do have a pool in the community. Come out and see us because we want to see you there. This weekend, we're having Paws and Rec Day. I'm so excited. And that'll be at Holland Park. And what we're going to do is we're going to do something for our four-legged friends at the dog park, and then we're also going to have a free sports clinic for the kids with our summer camp staff out at the fields. So the dogs, we're going to have a costume competition and then a trick competition. So those with dogs, come on out. And then also for the kids, we're going to go through basketball, tennis, soccer, and a couple other sports for the kids that do come out. The next weekend is our Tour de Palm Coast. We're very excited. It's our second annual. We started last year, very successful. So we're going to do it again with Bill Butler. We're going to start at Waterfront Park this year at 8 a.m. and then do a little tour around Waterfront Park. And the route is online too if you want to see it. And then that is also our Frida Zamba Pool Day. Again, we come back to the pool where it's $1 admission and the first 200 guests get free hot dogs. And then the fun just keeps going. And then July 22nd is our free movies in the park. We moved it this year, or this July, from the first Friday to the third Friday. So July 22nd, movies in the park. July 23rd is our open house at the tennis center. They're doing a couple different things. They're doing cardio tennis, a couple of clinics. They're doing a clinic for the kids too, so that's going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully people will come out and see the tennis center. And then July 30th is our putt and hit at Palm Harbor Golf Club. They have special rates that they're going to be giving that day, and they're also going to have a free golf clinic by the head golf professional, Jeff Ryan, and that'll be at 1 p.m. on the putting green. So we have a lot going on, and hopefully everyone will come out and see us, especially this Saturday at Holland Park for Paws and Rec Day.
She's a little excited about the Paws and Rec Day. I don't know. Just to add a little more details to some of the events. The Frida Zamba Pool Day, the hot dogs were donated by Winn-Dixie, so they are providing that to us for that day for distribution to those first 200 guests. And then on that Saturday, the 18 holes of golf Yeah, it's, the special price is $20 and includes a cart. So the goal of all these events is really to get everybody out to one of the events to see a park maybe that they hadn't been to in the past, didn't know existed. There's an event, there's an opportunity there to participate in something, or just to come out and see one of the beautiful facilities we have here in our community.
Luann,
yes.
the pause
Yes.
at Holland Park, you didn't give a time for that.
Oh, we're starting at 9 a.m.
Okay, thank
For
you.
the dog portion of it. And the kids' sports clinic will start at 9:30.
Right.
And what day is golf?
That is July 30th,
Thank you.
last
That's
Saturday
you.
of the month. And the movies in the park are at Central Park, and they start at dusk.
And what movie?
It is Legend of the Guardians, The Owls of Ga'Hoole. So
Okay.
it's a movie about owls, talking owls. So, I heard it's very good, though. Okay, so lastly, we just want to end with some special moments in Parks and Recreation between Candace and Becky as they were trying to put together a promotional video. So.
Hello, how's it going? Guess what? It's that time of year again. You guys are Flag Football 2012, ready for sign-ups. Sign-ups start November. I know, well, I don't know how to start it. Hey guys, guess what time it is? It's flag football time. Come on out and register. Registration starts November. I'm supposed to keep going.
I want you to know they're always like this.
You can sign up now at the Palm Coast Community Center or Frida Zamba swimming pool.
Luann, you give them too much sugar in the morning.
Yeah.
Candace likes to
Hey guys,
dance.
guess what time of year it is? It's adult flag football time. Join us. Adult flag football time. Brought to you by Palm Coast Community. All skills and all abilities. Sign up now at the Palm Coast Community. Sign up now. Woo-hoo! Sign up now. Sign up now. Ready to go though? It's getting boring.
Come quicker, Dejo.
Along with all the serious work we do enjoy our jobs immensely, and want to thank everybody who helps us, including our mayor, city council, our city manager, who supports us each and every day as we try to provide for our community. I want to thank, too, behind the scenes, our TV 199 crew who helped us put all these videos together. So thank you very much for your hard work. And if anybody should have any questions about any of the events or activities coming up, you can reach us here at the office at 986-2323. Follow us on Facebook or visit our website at palmcoastgov.com. So thank you very much, and enjoy Parks and Recreation. Get out there tonight, this month.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to suggest that the city start a collection point for acting classes for the staff.
Mr. Britt, that's going to be a tough act to follow.
Yeah, Ray, can you be that entertaining?
It's just a good thing they went before me, because I don't think they would be able to follow.
Agenda item number 3, presentation on city budget and finance. Mr.
Mayor.
Landon, you want to introduce?
Yes, please. This is the last of Mr. Britt's segments of municipal finance and budgeting. He's done 3 others, and this is going to be his 4th and last. This is more about where we've been the last few years during the tough times and some of the cuts we've made and the differences property values have had on budgets, et cetera. So without further, he doesn't let me know about his philosophical presentations at the end, so I'm dying to hear what it is tonight. So no pressure though, Ray.
No. Actually, I went and did a little more reading up on Machiavelli after my last presentation. He was mean. So
I think they coined a term for him.
yeah. So anyway, I'm not going to lay any Machiavelli on you tonight. Okay, just to kind of refresh everybody's memory, we kind of have done a little budgeting and government budgeting and finance 101, dealing with the regulations and terminology. We talked about the revenues, the various revenue sources that are available to local governments. Last time we talked about the various funds, what revenues went into those funds and what those expenditures could be done out of each of those funds. And as the city manager said, tonight we're going to talk a little bit about what we've been doing the last few years to get the budget balanced with our declining revenues. This is going to be one of those 10,000-foot looks at it. We're not going to go into a lot of detail, but we are going to look at each department in the general fund. First, I'm going to start with the millage rate history. And this goes back to 2001, the table that you see here. The comparisons that I'm going to do through the presentation only are from 2007 to 2011. Reason we picked 2007, or part of the reason I picked 2007, one, it was the last budget that was done by our previous city manager. And then late 2007 is when the recession supposedly started. And lest we forget, officially the recession ended back in 2009, which is almost 2 years ago. As you can see from the table here, back in 2002, our millage rate was actually at 3.5. It came down a little bit, stayed flat for a few years, came down for a couple more years, and then went back up, and we are currently at 3.5 mills again. Since 2007, our taxable property values have dropped almost $1.8 billion. That's about a 28.5% decrease during that period of time. The millage rate that we have put into the general fund actually has increased from 2.5 to 3.5, which is about a 40% increase. However, our millage that we put toward our capital projects has dropped from 3/4 of a mil down to 0, which is a 100% decrease. The total millage rate has increased from 3.25 to 3.5, which is a 0.25 mil increase, which is 7.7% increase over that 4-year period of time. Even though the millage rate has gone up a little bit, the actual taxes that we have collected have dropped by $4.5 million, which is a 23% decrease over that 4-year period of time. Now, while we're on this screen, just want to point out a few things. I saw a statistic the other day that said state revenues, and this is nationwide, state revenues this year are up about 9%. However, local government revenues are still down about 1%. And the reason for this goes back to when we talked about revenues and that we wanted to have diversification in our revenue sources, because revenues react differently to different economic conditions. State revenues are up because states rely primarily on sales tax and income tax. Those are the first ones to go down when the recession hits. They're the first ones to come back when the economy turns around. Property taxes, which local governments rely on very heavily, are lagging. And you can see this here. The recession started in 2007, but you see in 2008, our property values actually continued to go up for another year after the recession started, because they are a lagging revenue source. What that means on the other end is that they went down in 2011. We just got our numbers Friday for next year. They're down almost another 13%. And even if they were to jump up 10% between now and the end of September, you would not see that revenue until fiscal year 2013. And personally, I don't think they're going to jump anywhere near 10% between now and the end of September, or the end of the year even. So property taxes are a lagging revenue source. The other thing here is, you notice that from 2001 to 2008, property tax revenues increased and increased and increased and increased. Even though the millage rate went from 350 down to 340, down to 3 1/4, down to 2.96. And you will recall all during that time, people, or everything you heard was, well, taxes are going up. Our taxes are going up, our taxes are going up. Nobody ever said much of anything about the millage rate while the millage rate was going down. Now the property tax revenues are going down. What do we hear these days? Millage rate's going up, the millage rate's going up. It's not taxes are going down, the millage rate's going up. I was trying to think of some things that I wanted to say, and to be honest with you, I really wanted to take a shot at the state legislature. Y'all know I love the state legislature. Because they keep meddling in local government's business. And in 2008, you see when the millage rate dropped, that was partly because the state said, you got to cap your revenues, you're taking in too much revenue. But the fact of the matter is, the state did leave us an out, that we could still raise the millage rate, but it takes a certain number of votes in order to do that. And also, I keep hoping now that the legislature will keep poking their fingers into property taxes until it gets to the point that they mess it up so bad that finally some judge will say, this is a big mess, it's not even constitutional, let's get rid of it and start over again. So that's my philosophizing there for tonight. Now, one other thing on here. When times are good, and I'm gonna do the question thing here. When times are good, and you've got money to pay all your bills, and you've got some extra money, there's really three things you can do. You can take that extra money and you can go spend it on stuff that maybe you really don't need, or maybe it's stuff you do need, or just things you wanted for years, but you just go spend it and blow all of it. You can save it. You can save some of it, because eventually things may turn bad. Or you can go to your boss and say, hey, listen, I've got lots of money coming in, I'm paying all my bills, and I really don't want to go blow it on anything, and I don't want to put it in savings for a rainy day. So how about you just reduce my pay, and that way I don't have to worry about it. Well, that's kind of what has happened to us as a city. The amount of money coming in has gotten reduced. And over the years, it's continued to get reduced, and instead of instead of our millage rate maybe staying the same and generating some extra revenues that we put into savings, it's gotten cut back. I think people tend to forget that everything is cyclical. And I think the 90s did it to us. The stock market went nuts for 10 years, and everybody said, oh, everything's going to keep going good, everything's going to keep going good. And all of a sudden in 2001, the tech bubble busted. Well, how many years did it take us to forget that? And then we had a real estate bubble. And in a few years, we'll forget that. But the thing to keep in mind is everything is cyclical, and the bad times are going to come back around again. The good times are going to come back around again. We just need to prepare for the bad times during the good times. And, personally, you've got to take the money, and you've got to save some money to handle the bad times. And I think a lot of people have forgotten that over the years, and I go all the way up to the federal government with that, and that's the biggest mess any of us, I think, have seen. So anyway, okay, I'm going to move on from that. Over the past 4 years, with the decreases in the property values and the decreases in the millage rate, existing taxpayers, these are the ones that are here from year to year, have actually saved almost $8 million in property taxes. So that's money that has stayed in in the economy. I don't necessarily want to say local economy, because some of these people don't necessarily live here year-round, so not all that money stays local. Okay, as I said, I'm doing comparisons to 2007. However, some things have changed since 2007, so I actually went in and had to make some adjustments so that we're kind of comparing apples to apples. And in 2007, building permits and inspections was in the general fund. It has since been separated out into an enterprise fund. So I went back to, in 2007, I deducted that from the general fund expenditures. Information technology and communications also became an enterprise fund. That was pulled out of 2007. This was in order so that 2007 isn't skewed. Now, since information technology was pulled out, and in 2011 there's actually a charge to the general fund departments from information technology to cover their portion of the cost, I had to go back and put in what the charge would have been in 2007 had IT been a separate fund at that time. So that added some back to the general fund. And then I also removed some capital expenditures for a large land purchase. That was the Fulton Furness land purchase, a couple $1 million. And we had about $300,000 in an expansion at the City Hall on 2 Commerce Boulevard that year, where we added office space. So that's to get 2007 so that it's comparable to 2011. And the reason I went over those is because I don't want somebody going and looking at 2007 going, well, that's not the numbers from 2007. There are some adjustments in there. Okay. And we are only dealing with the general fund tonight, and we're going to talk about each department, the reduction in expenditures and the reductions in personnel. General fund in total, after the adjustments to 2007, the total expenditures were about $25.4 million. In 2011, it's estimated we'll be at about $26.1 million, which is about a $640,000 increase over 2007, which is about 2.5%. Full-time equivalent employees, and I'm using that because some people have gone from full-time to part-time, and it's just easier to deal with it that way, has actually decreased by almost 12 full-time equivalent employees over that 4-year period, which is about a 5% decrease in personnel in the general fund. I also threw in on this, I didn't do it on each department, but the per 1,000 resident population numbers. For each 1,000 residents in 2007, we had 3.23 employees in the general fund. In 2011, we had 2.89, which is about a third of an employee decrease per 1,000 population, or a 10.5% decrease. So we're doing things with fewer people compared to our population. Okay, administration. These are a lot of small departments. I grouped them together. This includes city council, city manager, community relations, purchasing and contracts management, economic development, city clerk, human resources, city attorney, finance, and non-departmental. The reason for putting these together, number one, they're small departments. All of them together only add up to a little less than $3.8 million for 2011. And because of reorganization, for instance, purchasing and contracts used to be part of finance. It's now part of the city manager's office. Economic development used to be paid for out of non-departmental. It's now a separate department. And these didn't have totally separate budgets before, so it was also easier just to group them. We've actually reduced expenditures over the 4-year period down about $640,000, or about just under 15%. Number of employees has gone down almost 8, which is actually about a 25, almost a 26% decrease in employees in all of these administrative offices. Engineering, big drop. We had a major reorganization in there last year, down $840,000, or a 66% decrease, almost 2/3. Full-time equivalent employees have dropped by 54%, almost 4 employees decrease there. Facilities maintenance actually has gone up about $95,000, which is 16%. However, thing to keep in mind in there is this is where the rent for the city offices is paid from. That's $240,000 a year. So without that in there, this department would have been down, but because we had to add the rent number in there, this department is up. Full-time equivalent employees in here is down 1, which is a 33% decrease. Parks facilities, down about $52,000, almost a 5% decrease. Still has 12 employees, which it had before. However, keep in mind, during that time period, Ralph Carter Park has come online, Waterfront Park has come online. There's been more trails added. So these same 12 people are taking care of more parks. Recreation, down about $80,000, a 6% decrease. Number of full-time equivalent employees is down about 4.5, which is almost a 16% decrease in personnel and recreation. And they still have all that energy. And the general, I thought what was funny, the general mentioned that Luann gives them too much sugar in the morning. You notice that film was being done at night. They must be getting way too much sugar in the morning. Planning. This is actually up about $52,000, which is about a 3.5% increase as far as dollars. However, the number of personnel have been decreased by almost 4, which is actually a 20% decrease. So this one's kind of an anomaly. And actually, I went back and, trying to determine what it had caused it. And a lot of it seemed to have to do with the employees that were moved out of here were more clerical employees. And we've brought in some more professional staff. So payroll went up a little bit. But on the operating expense side, our actual professional services cost went down some because we were able to do more stuff in-house because we have had the professional people on staff. Code enforcement. Code enforcement's up about $178,000, which is a 9% increase. Personnel-wise, are up almost 7 employees, which is about a 35% increase in code enforcement. Law enforcement, of course, this is contracted out. Back in '07, though, we did have one employee in here that was the law enforcement coordinator, who is now back working at the sheriff's office. So they had a 100% decrease in personnel in that department. However, our expenses for law enforcement are up about 4%, or $100,000. Streets and drainage. Expenses are actually down about $147,000, which is about a 2.7% decrease. Full-time equivalent employees are down about 6.7, which is about a 13% decrease in streets and drainage. Fire. Fire's up almost $2 million, a 36% increase in expenditures in the fire budget. Full-time equivalent employees went from 48 to 66, which is an increase of 18, or 37.5%. We opened 2 new fire stations during this period of time, and that's why this budget has gone up as much as it has. Now, I pulled this slide from one of last year's budget presentations. And it was just talking about the future. Well, the future's here. This budget last year was intended to be a sustainable operating budget if revenue levels out, but capital infrastructure will have to be addressed in the future. As you recall, we took all of the money that we were, the millage that we were putting into capital and moved it all to the general fund. The key here is revenues have not leveled out. Revenues are continuing to decline. So while it would have been sustainable if we keep the same revenues, generate the same amount of revenues, it's not sustainable if the revenues continue to go down. And as was said back when we were looking into the future, we said future cuts, if any, must come from boots on the streets. The last 4 departments there that we looked at, and I intentionally put them in dollar amount order, the last 4 departments, code enforcement, law enforcement, streets and drainage, and fire, account for 67% of the general fund budget. Over $17 million of the total $26 million general fund for 2011. If any cuts are going to have to be made, those are the only departments where you're going to be able to find the amount of money to make up for the decrease in property taxes and other general fund revenues. And those kind of options we will be getting to in our next presentation. At this time, I don't know exactly when that's going to be. We're still pulling stuff together, but the next presentation will begin to present those options to you, which would include either millage rate increases or cuts to the general fund budget. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up.
That was
Excellent.
kind of sobering. Any council questions?
I've got one.
Mr. Meeker?
Ray, in the 010-011 budget, there is almost $3.7 million set aside in the fleet management fund. And I'd like to know what would happen if the shortage that you're looking at came out of that fund as a one-time hit, and you stretch that fund out from, what is the time period, 5, 6 years to 6 or 7 years or something? What happens if we didn't replace the fund with that type of money in the next budget?
We have been pushing back replacing vehicles and equipment every year for the last several years. at some point, a lot of those vehicles and equipment are going to need to be replaced. If we don't have that money available, then you're going to have a big hit to your millage rate to replace that stuff. That's what the fleet management fund was set up for, was to smooth that out by making level payments over several years so that the money was there to replace those vehicles and equipment at the time that they needed to be replaced. If a piece of equipment lasts longer than we originally thought it was going to last, then we quit making lease payments on that. So the money just sits there. It makes a little interest while it's sitting there, which helps cover the cost, the increased cost, because every year it's going to cost a little more to buy that same vehicle or equipment. So basically, yeah, it's, if you pull that money out of there and use it, then you're setting yourself up to get a big hit down the road somewhere.
But 2 points on that. I mean, when we last looked at that master sheet of vehicles and the ones that we had anticipated using this kind of money on, there was a large number of vehicles that were proposed to be replaced. But when we looked at the list in detail, we narrowed it down considerably and replaced the worst ones, figuring we could stretch it out again. And I'm thinking that we have kind of like an assumed life on a lot of these vehicles that goes into your assumptions, and we're finding that through our own maintenance or the good care we provide them, that we're being able to stretch these vehicles out longer. Also, I'm not saying zap the entire budget.
No.
I'm saying maybe in a given year, you take
two out.
take 2 or 1.5 out and almost eat up the difference that we're looking at for this year on a one-time hit.
Well, part of the reason we've been able to stretch some of these, we had some extra pickup trucks because of trying to gear up the building department. We bought a lot of pickup trucks in anticipation of bringing building inspectors in, which didn't occur before the bottom fell out of everything. So therefore, we did have some extra pickup trucks that we have been able to use to replace other pickup trucks that have worn out and have gone out of the fleet. So we didn't have to purchase some of those. The pickup trucks and the small vehicles aren't necessarily the big problem. Mike likes for me to pick on him. One fire truck's $400,000.
Is $1 million, wasn't it?
Well, that's his big truck, and yes, you can shell out $1 million on one fire truck. There's other big pieces of equipment. These dump trucks, the VACCON truck that is used over at utility. That's over $200,000 for VACCON truck.
And we're still talking about leaving money in the fund for that type of stuff. This is something, we don't need to get into tonight. I'm just saying, this is something that I really want to focus in on a little bit more in detail.
It kind of goes back to the same, we talk about capital expenditures, and you don't spend one-time money on recurring expenditures. You use it for capital. And in effect, that's what this is. This is capital money that has been set aside a little bit at a time to make that one-time expenditure. And that, in effect, what you're doing is you're taking a capital type money, one-time expenditure type money, and you're putting it into a recurring type expenditure, which means it's not going to be there next year. And I really thought the property values were going to have turned around by now. I think other people did too. And we did use some fund balance one year to balance the budget to keep from making too many cuts and to keep from raising the millage rate. That was 2 years ago. If we had to use that same amount of money for these last 2 years, we wouldn't have anything left. And as I said earlier, we got next year, and probably 2013 is still maybe even going to have a down property values again in 2013. So you're talking basically 2 years. So if you start taking those one-time revenues, there's not going to be enough of them to stretch it out until the property values turn around. And that's the danger of using those one-time revenues.
Mrs. DeStefano.
We're going to be addressing this at budget time. I think Frank makes a good point, and I think that in the budget discussions, you'll be bringing to us the fleet management and what we're looking at and when they're going to be replaced. I think we have to look at it hard, but I think this is a budget discussion and not really tonight is not the time to. I know there's a couple ideas I have too, but let's hold up until we get into a budget discussion. Thank you, Ray. I think you did an excellent job.
Thank you. For Council Comment, Mr. Lewis.
Yeah, Ray, just to go back on the on the three departments you talked about in terms of that might have to take a hit this coming budget session. And you mentioned the fire department, code enforcement, and what was the other one?
Law enforcement.
Code enforcement, law enforcement, streets and drainage, and fire.
And fire, right. But with fire, Frank was talking about the fleet, but with fire, we had that large expenditure for the ladder truck. And then we had two firehouses that we opened up. And if I understand you, you're saying that because of those expenditures, fire is going to be one of the areas that we have to look at. But were those, in one case, that ladder truck was a one-time expenditure, wasn't it?
Yes, but that was purchased out of fleet. It does not have anything to do with the numbers that are in the general fund. It doesn't affect these numbers that you're seeing up here. That was purchased out of the fleet fund.
Ray, I need to, for everybody to understand, fleet is a savings account.
Right.
And that the way we buy our equipment is basically we save up over time so that when it's time to buy that piece of equipment, we pay cash for it versus what a lot of communities do, and whether that's at home or private sector, everyone, is you borrow money to buy them. To now take that savings and use it for operations is not going to solve the problem. It may transfer it a year or two, but a year or two from now, your problem will be even bigger. If I can stress one thing, because I've seen communities do it, if you're going to reduce revenue, you have to reduce expenditures to meet that revenue. To go after these one-time capital, your savings accounts, whether we got a number of them. Ray's gone through them. The reserve, the ending fund balance. We've got fleet. There's some others out there, capital funds. But once that money's gone, you're still going to have the same problem. Unless you really think property values are going to turn around and increase 12, 13% this year. And if you think that, you'll be one of the few. Let's just put it that way. Because this problem will still be there. Now you don't have your savings account. So long term, now you're going to have to go out and borrow money, and it's all going to cost you more. I've seen communities do it. I've been involved in organizations that do it. It's an easy fix today. It is takes an organization like we have, which has been financially sound, and makes it financially a risk. Then your bond companies and everybody else takes a look at you, and there's a lot of consequences. So if I could stress one thing, if you're going to reduce revenue, that's fine, but you have to reduce expenditures accordingly and not take savings account and pretend like we're now balancing the budget, because you aren't balancing the budget. We tried that, as Ray said in the past. We're at that point. Revenues and expenditures need to match. You need to stay within your means.
And I mentioned those 4 departments because they are the largest departments, dollar-wise. And just to give you an example, if you took parks, facilities, and recreation, I'll scare Luann to death with this one. If you took those 2, if you took the entire parks program and recreation and just got rid of all of them, that will not cover your shortfall. Those departments are so small, you can't get enough cuts out of there to cover your shortfall. That's why you're going to have to look, if you're going to cut expenses, you're going to have to look at those 4 large departments: code enforcement, law enforcement, streets and drainage, and fire.
But one last thing, and that's with the future. This isn't new news. We've been saying this all along. We aren't trying to say, okay, well, police, fire, that's, popular scare tactics. We've done everything in all the other departments up to this point. And I think that's what we've tried to say, is up to this point, we've not touched those boots on the street, those services. There's also, obviously, like, us continue to use park maintenance. If you quit maintaining the parks, it's like the neighbor that quits maintaining their yard. It may look real nice, but a year or 2 later, what's it look like? And then to try to bring it back is very difficult also. So there's long-term consequences that go along with some of these decisions that we'll talk about more. It's not a one-time, it's not a one-year decision to be made. It really has to do with some long-term impacts.
Other council comments, questions? Ray, thank you. We've got our work cut out for us.
Sorry to end on such a down note.
Reality therapy. This brings us to the consent agenda, but before we move to the consent agenda, you probably noticed there's a relatively new face sitting to Mr. Landon's left. Normally you see Mr. Bill Reichman, who's our city attorney, and when Mr. Reichman is absent, you see Mrs. Katie Reichman sitting in his place. But Bill and Katie are taking a well-deserved 25th anniversary vacation, so I'd like to welcome Ms. Deborah Nutcher from the same firm, who's with us tonight. So far, we haven't anything for you to do, but we're certainly glad you're here.
So easy.
We have 2 items on the consent agenda. Does anybody wish to remove anything from the consent agenda? If not, is there a motion to approve the consent
Mr.
agenda?
Mayor, I move that the 2 items on the consent agenda be approved.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries without objection. This brings us to the public participation portion of the meeting. Any from the public wish to be heard? Please give us your name, limit your contribution to 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Ed Carreau, Palm Coast. Council members have a 19-page packet that details my request for Children's Memorial Garden. In fairness, if there are any candidates here or reporters or others who would like to have a copy, I have them for you. I'm here tonight due to the wonderful guidance from City Clerk Virginia Smith, and I sure thank you. I also thank the Casey Anthony court case people for concluding, so our area TV investigative reporters will be free for CMG next week. They cut that a little close, though. John Netz has been its invaluable mentor since the start. CMG's vision, perfectly written by John Netz, simplifies a way to accommodate children who may be in their 50s without destroying it for grieving families of lost young children and young adults. The key is understanding CMG is not a cemetery, but a very special garden. Therefore, it is not a place to record details of death, except for any memorials already placed. My mission is to request a hearing at your mid-July meeting. That's my deadline only because of the 40% museum discount on 4 bronze sculptures of children playing, which ends July 29th. I'm offering to donate those $10,000 sculptures because they will add to the wonderful help our grieving families get from the many inspirational messages at CMG. They are by far the best way families help each other while they help themselves. At your mid-July council meeting, I urge you to do two things, and those are in the packet because I only have 3 minutes. Especially for our very special Mary. If someone came up with a way to transform aching knees, like both of us suffer from, to versions 50 years younger, would you say, let's do it for all those aching knee residents? Or yield to the city manager who says, I mandate no? At CMG, we're not talking about aching knees. We're talking about aching hearts and whole beings that can be uplifted during short visits to CMG, as long as council beats illogical mandates to kill the very special proven things that make CMG such a success. In nasty old business is a saying some subscribe to, frankly I never did, people are family or traffic just here for a while. Council members are elected to aid all residents, taxpayers, and voters as family. Please add CMG to your agenda for mid-July. I thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening, Bob.
City Council, Bob Jurgel. I have a little request to make. We've discussed previously the paving of Old Kings Road from south of Utility Drive down to the 4-lane highway to nowhere. I ride that road 3-4 times a week, and it's rattling my teeth and rattling my car. And I just noticed on your consent agenda, you spent $70,000 for landscaping on Belterre, and our easterner Belterre is falling apart. And I'd like to know what the city plans to do about at least paving that portion of the road to give us easy access down to 100, because I don't like to drive on I-95. And one thing that's a little crawling my back, it's a little bit, is a long time ago, Mayor Canfield had a green line put up Old Kings Road up to the Knights of Columbus. That green line's been there 10 years at least. And every time I get visitors who come to visit the Palm Coast, they always say, what's that green line for? You know, I think we should spend a little bit of paint and paint the green line, because I don't think Jim likes that as his legacy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. Actually, I'd love to find out what kind of paint that was.
Yeah.
Next speaker.
My name is Bill McGuire, and I live in Palm Coast. I want to make sure I understand Mr. Britt's presentation on the budget, so my question's real simple. I believe the ad valorem receipts expected are give or take around $15 million, but Mr. Britt, I believe, said the budget is going to be $26 million. Where's the other $11 million and change going to come from? Thank you, Your Honor.
We'll get you an answer. Next speaker. Next speaker.
Good evening, council members. My name is Adam Rieger. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Mathis and Murphy in Jacksonville, and have the pleasure to represent Allied Veterans of the World and Affiliates Incorporated. Allied Veterans of the World and Affiliates operates an internet center here in Palm Coast. I know that some time ago the council passed a moratorium not opening any more stores so they could review this issue and make a reasoned decision as to what to do. I wanted to give you a little bit of background about Allied Veterans. They are a 501c19 veterans organization. That's a determination that's given by the Internal Revenue Service. They're tax exempt. They exist for veterans. They are veterans, and their internet center is one of several ways that they raise funds to fulfill their charitable purpose. They also do cookouts, bingo, car washes, things of that nature. They're very involved in their community. They provide scholarships to ROTC students. They assist the Veterans Administration in many ways. The internet cafes are businesses that sell internet time. Allied Veterans sells internet time at a competitive market rate, 20 cents a minute. And in order to promote the sale of that product, they offer what is commonly known as a sweepstakes. This is a prize giveaway that's permitted by the Florida legislature under 849.094 Florida statutes. That's a statute that was enacted in 1971. Allied Veterans was organized in 1979, so the statute's not new. The organization is not new. They're not fly-by-night. They are over on the other side of the interstate on Plaza Boulevard, I believe it is, next to the Brewsters. I invite everyone to go in. It's a beautiful place. It's safe. It's bright. It's well lit. It's clean. And we ask the City Council just to consider reasonable regulation in this area. I recognize that there may be some organizations that do not play by the rules and create a bad image or potentially are engaged in activity that may not be considered legal. We are not one of those organizations. We do support a reasonable regulation in this area. It can be beneficial. It can pay for itself. You can regulate who gets a permit, who doesn't. You can limit the number of permits. You can limit the number of computers in the stores. And I'm happy to answer any questions about this now or at any later point. And before I finish, I know I've got just a couple seconds, I wanted to pass out. I've got one for, I think, each council member and maybe one extra for the city attorney or the city manager, a proposal regarding legislation if you're interested. It also contains an actual ordinance that we think would be helpful. This ordinance has been vetted.
15 seconds.
Jacksonville has passed one similar, Leon County has passed one similar, and I only have one of these because it's a lot of paper. It's the bona fides for the company. I invite you to please take a look.
Thank you. If you want to give the large copy to the city clerk, please do not make copies. If council wants to look at it, it'll be in the office. We'll save a tree or two that way.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think your key word was reasonable.
Yes, I agree. Thank you.
Next speaker.
Good evening, Mayor.
Evening.
Council. Dan Hughes, my name. I'm a citizen of the community, 18 years. I've been through and serving with all the congressmen that served our area for 18 years here in Palm Coast, Florida. I chair Congressman Mica's Advisory Committee on Veterans Affairs, Tilly Fowler's Veterans Advisory Committee, and Andrew Crenshaw before John Mica. Worked 18 years to bring the new National Cemetery to the northeast section, Central Florida. Long time coming. We put 2 on the table here in the area of 11. Jacksonville went out with the National Cemetery. We are now at 2009 burials at the National Cemetery. And I want to say that serving 20 years, my brother as his chairman of Veterans Affairs and Merchant Marine Fisheries, I bring a lot of experience as a volunteer to the veterans end, and the veterans is my game. When we first organized the National Cemetery, we were scratching our heads as a committee of 8. We're now 18 with funds to do for the National Cemetery as when the National Cemetery comes on with its 600 acres, what needs to be done to bring a National Cemetery into the area and to get it up running. And I'm here tonight to support Allied Veterans. They're one of the finest organizations that I know that support veterans. If you or anybody takes away Allied Veterans, you're going to cut our arms off, because they're the only people in this state that give us money to do what we have to do for our veterans. They gave me $50,000 to date of seed money to do the things at the National Cemetery that needed to be done to get it up off the ground and get it running. This is over and above the federal government, and there are 8 or 9 employees that run the National Cemetery. We do all the events and all the extra things, the bell towers, the $35,000 bell tower we're bringing in, and the 9 yards to make this one of the finest national cemeteries in the country. And it is going to be. We're working on a $25 million road into the National Cemetery from 95. We're working on an $80 million museum. And I want to say that over the years, Allied Veterans has given to the Jacksonville USO $230,000, Justice Coalition $180,000, Gainesville Veterans Hospital $240,000, Wounded Warriors $50,000, Northeast Hospice $40,000, Veterans History Project $10,000, and at this date, you
Dan,
can
15
triple that
seconds.
because we have given to, through history, Korea, Vietnam, World War II, documentaries in through St. Johns County. Honorary, $5,000, Dr. Stephen Wise.
Thank you very much.
Scholarship.
That's your 3 minutes. Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, if I could close, Mayor, just 1 second. I can't say enough about Allied Veterans. And it's not a place where it absorbs crime. I could walk out here and get bit by a rattlesnake. So what do we do with that? Let's get rid of all the rattlesnakes. You know, where there's money.
My wife would support you in that.
And crime. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting, but let's see if we can get an answer. Mr. Landon, the paving of Old Kings Road from Palm Coast Parkway down to Town Center Boulevard.
Yes, first of all, the concept was, as you all have heard many times, is it was going to be 4-lane divided, similar to what we did in the southern section close to State Road 100. That is funded by a improvement district that the large property owners, better known as developers along that stretch, had agreed to tax themselves to pay for those improvements. That is not happening anytime soon, and so at this point I've instructed our street department to include the 2-lane section that hasn't been resurfaced anytime soon in their annual evaluation for street improvements. And it will be included along with all the others and ranked, and then when it hits the ranking that justifies resurfacing, it will be resurfaced, provided we have those dollars still there available to resurface in the future. So the short answer is it will be included in the rankings along with all our other streets, as we've done with the last 10 years with the half-cent sales tax.
Thank you. The second question, the speaker points out that ad valorem taxes make up about 57% of the general fund revenues, and the question is, where does the rest come from? And I guess there's the answer.
Yeah, this was from my presentation a couple of times ago. I do not have the dollar amounts on here, but communication services tax is about 10%. Charges for services, which is like our recreation fees and planning fees and those kind of things, is about 12%. And intergovernmental revenues, which are our share of the state sales tax and some other monies from the state, make up about 7%. The budget document is online on the city website. It has all the dollar amounts associated with each one of these revenue sources on it.
In short, only a portion of the total budget comes from ad valorem taxes.
Right. In this case, about 57% for 2011.
Ray, I think another point, though, because I've already heard from staff, the numbers are confusing. If the millage rate stays the same and the downturn in the 12-13% downturn in property values, that represents about $1.9 million reduction in revenue. But you're using the figure 2.9 million. Can you go over
I round it to 3 million.
Okay.
But,
thank you.
Yeah, some other revenue sources in the general fund are down also. And things like our fire mitigation revenues down some. Kind of interesting. Part of the general fund revenue is included in this charges for services are charges to other city departments. The admin departments are all, a portion of the admin departments are billed out to the enterprise funds for like finance and human resources and all those. As we showed earlier, those departments have been cut significantly over the last few years. Well, guess what happens? The revenues coming from those enterprise funds aren't as much because there's not as much to bill out to the enterprise funds. So actually the charges for services go down some because of that. As city manager said, no good deed goes unpunished. So that affects general fund revenues. And I'd have to go through and look at some of the others, but yes, there are other revenues that are actually down a little bit from last year, or expected to be down a little from last year. Those are just some of them. So that's what really makes up the other $1 million shortfall that we have. And those will get looked at and may get adjusted as we get additional history during this year. But right now, it looks like another $1 million on top of the property taxes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Discussion by City Council of matters not on the agenda. Mr. Mormon, we'll start with you. Mr. Lewis.
Nothing.
Mrs. DeStefano.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to know the status of the fence at Richardson Drive, or the fence by Rimfire Park?
It's on Rimfire Park.
Oh, it's on, okay. Is it up, or what is the status?
I do not know if it's been completed. I do know that it's been started. If it's not completed, it'll be a week or two. But they have, the contractor's out there and is working, or close to being completed.
To react on Mr. Carrera's?
Not tonight.
Okay.
Mr. Meeker. Was that, I'm sorry.
No, no, that's it. Thank you.
Mr. Meeker.
I just wanted to know, we've had recent discussions on increasing the fees to use our sports complexes. And I seem to remember a while back we had a discussion on some signage options. I'd like to know if there's any problems with allowing organizations that have primary use of a facility to be allowed to sell sponsorships by individual field and then have a sign erected up that says something like field number 1 sponsored by the generosity of Palm Coast Internet Cafes or some other altruistic sponsor. And I'd like to see the city provide like a design meeting our standards without going overboard on the cost. So I'd like to know, do we have that type of option? Can the sporting leagues help offset some of their costs by getting major sponsorships and having, this field dedicated or, well, something similar to the language I was just proposing?
Right, we've talked about that in the past, and it would identify the field, and then, it's almost like I've seen in golf courses where at the tee, it will say this tee is sponsored by so-and-so, but it's actually nicely done into the tee marker. We have discussed that, in my opinion, very doable. Have not received any takers, but I don't know, we've actually tried to go out and sell it a whole lot too, but definitely an option. Like you said, the cost of the sign versus the revenue, I'm not so sure it's going to make up a huge amount, but the benefit of identifying the field so that when you go out there, okay, field 1, field 2, and where you're supposed to go, particularly tournaments, could be very helpful.
Good. Thank you.
I would offer a word of caution. Once you open that door, you cannot regulate to whom you sell advertising space.
No, but they have to adhere to the design.
There is a very significant risk when you start that.
Yes.
Mr. Meeker, you envision that the junior soccer league will get revenue from this sign, or the lacrosse team will get revenue from this sign. I can think of a number of organizations that I would not want to have signs on my public property.
Correct, Mayor, and I would hope that the organization seeking that sponsorship would be sensitive to that very concern and not take money just from anybody.
Okay.
I know.
I think
it's a
when
good
Mr.
point.
Reichman returns, Ms. Nutcher, I don't want to put you on the spot, but
you're right,
I think you
that's-
have a very slippery slope
You
here.
absolutely do.
But we allow signs to be hung as sponsorship signs all over the metal fences at the baseball diamond, right? Don't I have the same problem there?
Yes, it's a First Amendment type issue. It's any group, it's open up to any group, so you could get
You can't regulate.
any kind of
Just like-
objectionable group you could imagine.
It's like the election
Which
signs.
is why I would hope the organizations would be smart enough to
Well.
filter who they accept. No, Mary, if they're going to accept stuff from the National Communist Party of the United States or something, I don't know who we're talking
But the
about.
thing is, Frank, I don't think you, all right, that's for a future discussion. I just don't think you can regulate. If you're gonna let it out, if you're gonna say,
No, the groups themselves can regulate who they're going to accept money from.
not if it's on city property. You gotta have
What?
to- All right.
I think I'm going to
Take it to
refer this
workshop.
one to our
Bill,
attorney's office
You have
for
to
some
take a vote.
comment, because I think there are some very,
Yeah.
very significant risks there.
your turn. Do you have anything?
Nothing. Discussion by the city attorney of matters not on the
I know
agenda.
you lost it.
I don't have anything.
Discussion by city manager of matters not on the agenda.
Yes, first of all, 4th of July holiday, all reports I received went very well, and I heard very few fireworks going off in my neighborhood, and that's unusual, actually, so really appreciate the community understanding and respecting the fire danger that we've had this year. Just have to put another plug out. It doesn't take long with as dry as it was, even though we got some rain. We've also had a number of dry days, and it will dry out very quickly. So we all need to continue to be very cautious of the fire hazard out there and hope we get some more rain soon. The other update I wanted to give City Council is regarding our solid waste contract. We talked about it at a workshop. We're now gone further along. It's my understanding that some of you may have been contacted. So I wanted to kind of go over where we are. Just for the public, the city actually is responsible for residential pickup, not commercial, but just a residential pickup. And then we contract with a hauler. And right now, that hauler who was awarded the contract about 4.5 years ago is Waste Pro. As is the case with any major contract, you go through a formal procurement process, and in this case, it's a service, so it includes the cost of the service plus what are they going to offer. Recycling, yard debris pickup, they do different things, and so it's not just the price, but what do you get for that price. The contract we have with Waste Pro is a 5-year contract with a one-time option to renew it for an additional 5 years. That contract also states that if we renew it, we can negotiate new terms for the second 5 years. So what that means is that the city has the option to either renew the contract with Waste Pro as is, to renew it after negotiating different terms, or to go out to basically say, no, we're not going to exercise that renewal option and go out to a formal procurement process, bidding process, if you will. I think Mr. Reichman has actually indicated, and I've seen the same thing in communities, going out to bid sometimes sounds like, oh, well, we get the best price, but it's not always the case if the company that's currently doing the hauling feels that there is a potential for, being able to keep the customer. They might even give a better rate versus what you get during the bidding process. It's very, very competitive. It is a very difficult decision. Change is very difficult in this process for both the residents, for city, for the haulers, everybody. So what we have established is the process is to develop a recommendation for city council, meaning city staff. We put together a selection committee, as we normally do, to develop a informational report for city council, and a recommendation as to which one of those three options we want to proceed with. It will then be city council's decision as to renew as is, renew with a new negotiated contract, or instruct us to go out to bid and start a formal procurement process. We're not in that process right now, but what we have done is sent out a invitation for information, if you will, letter of information. In other words, what do the haulers have out there that they have to offer so that we can determine, do we have the best possible service? What are the other possible services, and what do they have to offer, so that we then can evaluate where we are today versus where we were 4.5 years ago. Use that as part of our process to provide City Council with a report and then a recommendation, and also allow you to gather that information prior to making a decision. After you get that recommendation, then you'll give us direction as to where we're going to go, and then the next 3 or 4 months we'll head in that direction. I know that, and we've talked about this also, that haulers lots of times will hire lobbyists, and they start trying to lobby elected officials. I think maybe even some of that's already gotten started. They all have a great car to sell, but we really have to be careful that we're comparing the apples to the apples, and not who's doing the best sales job. So we're going to try to put all that together. We have people with good experience, and we'll get this back to you. But I wanted you to know that that is out there, and that haulers can be very aggressive in their campaign procedures. So we wanted to give you a heads up.
It reminds me, Mr. Landon, when we were doing our search for a new city manager, we had one applicant who in the interview process bragged, in essence, that his city, where he was currently working, had the single most expensive solid waste contract of any place in the United States. They had individual little golf carts picking up side yard trash and so on and so on and so forth, so the big trucks didn't go down the street. You can get all kinds of wonderful things, but in most cases you wind up paying for it.
Yeah, yes, Mayor, and I've heard that too. Let me go to the other side. You'll hear a hauler say, oh, we can cut your costs. We'll do one a week service. We'll do the automatic carts that nobody can fit into a garage if you have 2 cars in it. So now you have these big, ugly carts in everybody's front yard. But they will tell you to cut their costs, but there's consequences to that side of it.
When we bid the last solid waste contract, we had 2 options. Twice a week pickup, once a week pickup. And everybody on council, myself included, I think assumed that once a week would be half as expensive as twice a week. It turned out it was about a 15% savings, and the explanation is simple. The biggest cost is the trucks and the tipping fees. If I pick the garbage up twice a week, or I pick it up once a week, I'm picking up the same amount of garbage, and I'm delivering it to the landfill, and the cost is per ton, so there's really not much savings.
We'll look at a lot of those different options and present that to you, but just want to warn that what seems logical on the surface with this issue, it's a lot more complicated. So, but that's our job, is to try to bring that information to you so you can make that educated decision versus a lobbying type decision.
I'm sorry to have interrupted you. Anything else, Mr. Landon?
Nope, that's all I had. Thank you very much.
Mr. Meeker?
I'll motion to adjourn.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much for your participation.